farm we had was just a survival farm. during the tough years, we just had a few cows, some pigs, and chickens, and mother canned everything, and the vegetables in the cellar and stuff. And we didn't get electricity until 1948. They paved the roads in 1948. And we had the, I guess some of the, you would know, we had the 32 volt system. Remember the, probably had, so we did have lights, but you couldn't do much else. My mother had the crank start the washing machine, had a little horse and a half bridge Stratton on it. See, sometimes the older ladies are not that mechanical. They had trouble starting it usually. The way we had to start it for her. But, and then carry water from the well. It's about 30 feet from the washing machine by buckets and dump it in. And hang them on the clothesline. But we used to ice fish and hunt, and drive the Model A right up on the ice over to the lake. Set up the big boats. But it was a good. I enjoyed growing up there. It was good. I'm still there. I'm still there. And yeah, it was a good life.
My mother was in the sanitarium all the time, and then once my dad passed away when I was 7, so that was how I got to live with my sister Harriet in Massachusetts for 1 year. Then I lived with my sister Imogene, Dr. Manning, in Uncasville for 2 years, and went to school down there. And her boss at Connecticut College for Women got transferred to Tennessee, and she wanted to take Imogene with her. And so then I went back to the farm and lived at my brother Steve's by the railroad tracks here between Franklin and Lebanon. So I was there for 5 years, I guess. And then my mother was back home again, so she thought I ought to be with her. So I was back in Kick Hill for, after that. I actually spent some of the time sleeping in Wyndham with my brother Donald, because he married a widow, and they had a chicken business, and now that I've been in the chicken business at home, but we also had cows at the time he was living there, so we had goat chickens and cows. Talking about 38 hurricane, we were picking up the chickens to put them in the chicken coop because they were getting blown all over the lot. They were out on range. And we decided it really weren't worth it because pretty soon the end of the coop started to come out. And so we decided it was time to go in the house and quit. And then a few minutes later, the whole 30 by 40 roof was laid up against the tree for about 30 minutes, and all over the yard. And it was a few days before we did much traveling, I can clear you. There was a hurricane in of course, I was the youngest of 9, so yeah, we had to use what we had, even though my dad probably had a better job than most people because he was an electrical engineer. But that was, and he passed away when I was only 6 or 7 years old. But he drove to work from Kick Hill and Lebanon to Uncasville in a Model T Ford. Of course, my older brothers and sisters tell about driving back from Indiana with the 8 of them in the, well, 9 and 12, 10 of them in the car. Before there was roadside, they stopped in church sheds and stuff a couple of nights on the way back on the dirt roads.
They didn't have seatbelts, did they?
No, they didn't have seatbelts. But then, so they talked an awful lot about that trip and how extensive it was. So what, it's pretty 1,000 miles in a Model T Ford with 8 people. No, 10 people, I should say. Because my dad used to, had a job off the farm. He worked at CM&P in Montville and probably drove to further to work than anybody else around at that time. Most of the people in Lebanon, if they worked off the phone, they walked either Willimantic Well, they walked to Colchester, or they walked to Norwich, depending which corner of town they were in. The center of town, that was mostly farms, and most of those people didn't go to anywhere else. But, getting to, well, in fact, Kick Hill, of course, was very steep, and my sister told me about my dad going down across the pasture, out to the side, and when it was too late, across the pasture, there was a place across the brook, you could drive across the brook. But that was the trouble always to get to work. Then the milk truck, we always used to have to take the milk. That was the thing that I did with my dad when I was 3 or 4 years old. I'd get up in the morning quick enough to go with him, and you take the milk down to State Road, meet the milk truck. And that was my time with my dad.
How I got here is kind of amazing. I was driving up here, and I never found out how my mother and father met. He was born in Sicily. My grandmother was born in Naples, and my mother, which was my grandmother's daughter, was born in Brooklyn. And my father come over here in 1917 to New York, but I never figured out how they met. And then my grandmother bought the farm in 1929, and it got turned over to my mother and father, before she passed away even. And that's how I got to be here, and I don't really know how did they meet. That's kind of a mystery to me.
In New York, probably.
Yeah, they met somewhere in New York. My father was in the service twice, once in the Army and once in the Marines. He played in the Marine band for the Capitol there, for the president. I don't know who was president at the time. He played the tuba. Boom, 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 that. And I don't know, maybe that's how I got into a little bit of music, but I'm kind of music deaf when I was young. Now I'm starting to hear a little bit better, but now I'm at the end of the career, I'm 83, you know what I mean? You can't see as good anymore, and I don't know, I'm getting not as good a worker as I used to be.
Well, I don't know about planting time, but I can't remember this part of it. Back in 1934, my father had a team of horses, he was out plowing. And I was a young fella, just about 4 years old, so I used to plow around behind the plow and picking up earth. That was my favorite thing to do at that time. And then he had a green team. A green team was one that's not really fully broken in. But he was with his head down watching the plow and the horses. He never saw me, so they tell me. And they came around and made another trip with the plow, and the horses straddled me, and they plowed me over. That's what they tell me. I don't remember that part, but I remember some other things right after that, a lot of things we didn't want to talk about crop, so.
Yeah, want to share a crop story?
I can't think we really, the different, we always had a variety plan and get that started, and then we just start our corn early till about 1st of May, a little later sometimes, but it looks like this year might be a little later to really get turned around. So,
Yeah, I wanted to talk about growing tomatoes. A lot of times we grew tomatoes the same variety, and you put them in the same area, pretty soon they're not producing hardly anything, but you change the variety, you can still put them over there, and the next year you get abundance again. And you should change your fields around if you can, but with corn, I don't think you have to. I've been going to school there, and they plant corn in the same fields for 50, 60, 70 years that I can remember, but they put plenty of cow manure. And used to have to put lime every 2 to 3 years, and sometimes we had a truck come in and then you unload 10 ton of lime, 94 pounds or whatever they were, and you get your exercise. But now we use the chicken manure and the pH is way up there, you don't have to lime. We haven't limed for 15, 20 years since using chicken manure. But we used to grow a lot of tomatoes. One time we had probably 42,000 plants, about 12 acres in the fields. We had 300 baskets with, my brother broke his ankle and I had to make delivery, so you had 2 or 3 trucks loaded. And I'd run up the moose up and drop 18 baskets, so I'd grab the other truck, go down to Norris, drop 20 off, then get to New London and Steinman Brothers. They had 2 guys in each place, and at 40, and then some would go on the ships for they'd be out for 2 weeks, so they'd take 5 or 10 baskets or boxes a piece. And I had to be back in Westerly by 7:45 to catch the peddler. I made it. I got up 3:45, but I made it there 7:45. But that night I had to play ball. I couldn't even run. My legs were like rubber. I got thrown out for the first time in my life at second base at all the years I played, till I was 39 years old. Then went back at 45, and I wasn't really a good hitter. And I hit the first home run for the team, and then they hit 3 others in that game. And I'm not a home run hitter. Now, we used to get picked up at 25 to 7 in the morning, and the school was 2 miles or 2¼ miles from the house, and we'd get home at 25 after 4. So my parents bought us bicycles. So good days, we'd ride the bicycle to school, and in 15 minutes we're home. At 3:15, 3:30, we're out in the field pushing the hand cultivators on the lettuce patches, and we used to plant 60 to 80,000 lettuce plants, and I did a lot of the covering, and I never kneeled down. I put my foot in the row, and I had long arms and just keep covering, and they'd set out and keep covering and covering 3 hours straight. Then you go and have lunch or something, 3 hours straight, and then hours after hours, and we didn't fool around. Sometimes when we picked tomatoes, you jog to the truck, and put your tomatoes on and jog back and pick. Because one time we had 9 or 11 workers. My brother John and I picked 100 and something baskets in 2 or 3 hours, and they only got 50 between a bunch of them.
That's not like today.
Question from the audience?
Could Joe explain covering lettuce?
Can you explain covering the lettuce a little more?
Yeah, well, somebody sets it out in a row 15 or 18 inches apart, and like this here, covers it all, all the way down the road, as fast as it could go most of the time.
That's planting, right, Joe?
Huh?
Planting.
Yeah, planting them, yeah. Then after they get a little bigger, the weeds started coming, so you had these hand cultivators, and you cultivate them rows. One way was wider, you go with a tractor with a small cultivator teeth, a special one, and you do 3 rows at a time. But the other way, you go crossways. We used to have a wooden marker, and it'd be all the same space. Now and then you could cultivate. That's the way we do in the squash and the winter pumpkins and that. Cross mark your rows. And you could go any angle you want, 45 degrees, sideways, 90 the other way. And you catch most of the weeds, you don't have to do too much hoeing. I think I'll explain one more thing or two. My brother Paul could pick beans like mad, especially when they were loaded. String beans and yellow beans and rolled beans and Kentucky's. Well, when they're loaded, he picked 15 minutes for a half a bushel, so he got 2 bushels in an hour. Most people take an hour to pick a bushel or more than an hour. And back in the early 60s, I bought this international trip plow, 3-bottom. And we had stones. We picked stones from kids, boy, big stones. And I had 7 dump trucks. And when I plowed these fields, I put ostrich eggs like this all over the field. Wow. And I put 3 dump trucks in the field, 2 or 3 acre field, so I didn't have to drive around. And I'd just take the loader all alone, and I'd pick up these rocks and jump off and put the other small ones in and dump them in. And I do that for, 10 or 12 acres, and you get your exercise.
My first job, Hayden was riding the dump brake. That's all right when you're working the hay the first time, but then when you rake the scavenge, after you pick it up by hand, and put it on the wagon, you go back and then rake the scavenge again. That never went over very big with me. My father was on the 10, I don't know, at the time. But I can remember, before we had the tractor, we had the horses, of course. My dad bought a tractor in about 1930. And that was quite a few people didn't have tractors. And one neighbor had one, and they used it to run the blower to fill a saddle. But when you stop and think of how they do corn now, I'll try to tell you from beginning to end how the corn planting went. First you had to plow the land with the horses, which was hard work. You could plow maybe 3 acres in a day. And then you pulled the harrow, and that was, for the horses, that was worse than the plow. We somehow, because it was probably 9 feet wide, maybe only 8. And that really dragged, and it just stayed right there and dragged all the time. And so then I can remember my older brothers, we'd have a stick, 20 feet wide, and you put hung chains on it, and you mark the cornfield where you're going to plant the corn. Sometimes they marked it both ways, so you planted the corn, so you could cultivate it both ways. Most of the time, I marked it one way. That was a big deal, cultivating corn and make it keep the head of the weeds. And then, of course, when you got ready to harvest the corn, you had a corn knife. That was this one.
I've got it up there. We use corn knife, that's what we had.
Yeah, and it was a blade about that long, with a short handle, and you lean over and cut the corn and laid it in the heap. And then you went back with the Boston wagon. First I remember them using dump carts, and they dumped in front of this cutter at the barn. You run the corn through the cutter, they had a big flywheel with knives on it, pipe up into the saddle. And if you put in more than 4 stalks, you plug the pipe. Usually, I know we had it with a tractor, some we had it, run it with just a one-longer engine. And I know one spell we had a period, they had a rack that you could back the car up on, and the rear wheels of your car would run the belt that run the chopper. So if you had about 6 or 8 guys, you could form 10 by 20 silo between chores. And now they cut that much in 10 minutes or less in a trailer truck. They're doing corn today.
1938 hurricane. And my 2 brothers and uncle were in school. They never made it home. They had to stay over about 2 miles as a crow flies in a house because the wires and poles and trees were down. And I'm watching out the window and these trees are blowing up like this, and I'm just turned 1938, I must have been 5 years old, just turned 5 years old, and my sister was a year younger. And the wind was blowing the glass in without no trees and nothing hitting it. The next thing that happened, my father picked me up, and my mother picked up my sister, and down the cellar we went. So when we heard the storm stop, we got out the back cellar door, and not one speck of wind and a beautiful sunshine, like you couldn't believe that it's calmed down that fast. And the next day, my uncle and the 2 brothers walked across the dead wires and got home. And the tree took them 3 days to cut up with a crosscut saw, no chainsaw then, and the axe. But they had to do others, and they'd drive around the lawn to get back onto the road to get around the tree.
Back then, the neighbors, everyone was a neighbor, even if they were 10 miles away, and they'd come and help us, help you, go help them, whoever needed most help, and all that worked for them, and it was so nice. Know that you always had somebody that helped you out. And I've been going down, taking care of the farm of the neighbor's cows, or one or the other, they come back and help me. It's a lot different than it is today. I don't even know our neighbors now. It's a shame. And things like that. I think some things that get me is more modern time. You go out to a restaurant and family has family time. They come out. They all have cell phones and text messages. Talking to everybody else within their family. I don't understand that part of it. I don't understand it. I think they'd be able to family time and listen. That was always what we always enjoyed. I can't give you any real stories other than it was a pleasure we did in January. Family would get together on Sunday, early, noontime or so, go down to the brook or the spring, and my mother would make the homemade chicken that was canned and homemade biscuits, and sit on had a few times we sat right on the ground, it was dry. Those things I think about a lot of times when I say, so we can go on and that, and somebody else wants to.
We didn't have any tractors on the farm. We had a horse and the cows for the family and the chickens. We had a lot of eggs. You have to pick eggs at 6 years old or 6.5 and milk the cow and, you know, split wood for the wood stove before the bus picks you up and that. And that was hard times because that was right after the Depression. I mean, it was still Depression time. We had a lot of food to eat, but not a lot of money to buy things. So sometimes you needed 2 horses, so we borrowed the neighbor's horse. Then when he needed to borrow our horse, he borrowed our horse and the cultivator. And even when they got tractors, they had to cultivate with a horse to get through certain rows to keep the weeds out of the vegetable crops. Because you couldn't get through with the tractor. You know, you needed one pass, you know.
We moved here in 1940 and didn't have any electricity. In fact, all 3 different places we moved to didn't have electricity. We had electricity until at that time. It was 45, it was 5 years we had brought electricity. So everything had to be done by hand. We had a lantern to go to the barn with, and milk the cows, a lamp in the house. So things, it was after electricity came, and we don't talk about that, I think, on that, how things changed. It wasn't just electricity, but the technology was going on. But for years, I think father was real mad. Nothing changed for about 100 years there. It seemed to be doing all the same way. Over the war after 45 was over that. Then the industrial part of it came in, and we had tractors, more tractors anyway, and so we switched over from horses to tractors. I still like to have horses. I still got 3 horses here, but I can't work myself too much. It was interesting. We had a lot with a plow, one machine, or a harrow. On some of the days it was really hot in the summer when we put hay in, and the weather was up to, like we had a few days here where it was up to 100 and something. My father would go on, do a little bit of mowing with the horses. It was so hot, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, you'd be out there mowing, and we only went maybe 6 or 8 times around the field, and then I had enough, the horses had enough work at that time. But that's how we did a lot of things that way. So other than we bring doing different things back then too. And maybe a few years after that, when they cut off corn by hand and put it through a cutter, there's always a few things that happened. There were a lot of accidents for that, unfortunately, but I can remember that fellow up in the silo, he leveled out the silage, and someone would pick up a half bushel of tomatoes and throw it in there. The poor guy up there, down white as a sheet, he figured for sure somebody had come off the pipe. And these things actually happened at the show. There was other things they did like that scare you. It wasn't really funny, but when you stop thinking about it, unfortunately, there was a lot of accidents that happened to some of the equipment, the early equipment, so.
Well, we never raised much corn till later on, and would be three of us, Frank Capicone and his son and myself. And we'd wholesale the corn, sweet corn, to the markets there. And we'd be up 4:45 in the field, no breakfast. So, and we'd be done by 8:30 usually, because the people in summer come and pick them up, the stand people, 20 apiece, and we'd get about 150 or 180 bushels. The three of us picked, and we're picking 18 to 20 bushels an hour apiece, and you gotta move. And we'd eat raw corn for breakfast 2 or 3 years to keep going. Yeah, but that was good. It was just as good as cooked or better, raw corn. But years ago, after the horse, we had a D2 Caterpillar crawler, no blade or anything, and we put the plow on behind the fellow who was working for us, for my father at the time, and we had the horse plow, and one day he broke 3 plow points, and it's cost him too much money to plow that, so we got a harrow, and I'm 11 years old, and I'm not below the seat, my head. The guy drove down the road, and he says, "I don't know what it is in the tractor." After we got around, he could see me. I was so little, and I had to start it with a crank, and I had a magneto, and that crank would fly backwards sometimes, kick backwards. You had to retard the spark, so I had to make a wooden clevis to put down there and bolt it, and then I could push it up and down without getting that damn shock when you started it to push it down.
Probably some of you knew Frank Bartizek. He married Janet Strauss, that's just down the road from us. And after they got married, he put him in the silo one day to level the silo, and they were putting the corn in. Well, that was all right. But when he got to noon, and it was later on when we put in more corn faster, and she realized she was up, and she was afraid of heights. She had to go back down the ladder from out of the silo from 15 to 20 feet up. And when she got in on the ground floor, she was really scared. That's a corn story. It's a little different. But, when you think of the amount of time it took to get corn in the silo, by the time you plowed the field, you harrowed it, you marked it, you planted the corn by hand with a push planter, and then you cultivated it with one row with a horse, and then you did that till it got to be about 2 feet high, and then you leave it grow until, of course, first middle of September you started putting it in. But it was really a lot of time, because by the time we went out, cut it by hand, picked it up, put it in the dump cart, took it up and dumped it in front of the silo, pushed it through the chopper, out into the silo. You put in a day's work by the time just to fill a 10 by 20 silo. And today, as I said, you cut that much corn in about 6 minutes with the new rigs. When we first had the self-propelled chopper, that was quite a deal. We didn't have to open up the rows to put the other choppers through, because when I was young, we always cut it by hand. That was a big deal when you got 6 or 8 guys from the neighborhood, and you did one side, and then you did the next one, you did the other. That's how we did it.
Mr. Manning, how did you unload the silage out of the silo?
With the,
Pitchfork?
well, no, silage walked, be walked about 8 or 10 times and keep it level, so and throw it out, and you had to pick it up again and put it in the wheelbarrow and dump it out in front of the cows. One of the, there was quite a few upright silos put up at that time. It was early 50s. One of the things that I did was very crazy. I built a trench silo that was horizontal. That was one of the things I did that never going to work. Now I don't know if I don't think there's been an upright silo built in 40 years.
So you have to climb the silo twice a day or once a day to get the corn out?
Most of the time I think we only fed them once a day. Hay once a day, corn once a day. Of course, you bought, your grain came in 100-pound bags instead of coming in going in the chute. That was the way it worked. I mean, I can remember when they had the freight car come into Lebanon Station, and then the farmers all come and get their grain from old eastern states. And they of course, you had to pay for the bill of lading on the freight before it got unloaded. So my dad would go to the Winter National and he'd get a check or a loan to be sure they had enough money to cover the bill of lading, and then everybody would come and get their grain that day, and then I forget how often we got it. Seems like 2 or 3 weeks, but not every week.
Miracle cure. Just to clarify the question on unloading the corn silage from the silo, there was a door at the bottom. But there was trouble with opening the door at the bottom of the silo because it emitted a gas that could be fatal. So that was a tough thing to do. You didn't ever have a trouble.
You threw the
top.
You threw them down, you didn't have the bottom. So that was a later invention because the silos on our place all had the bottom doors for unloading.
A regular silo?
Yeah, the tile silos.
upright.
Yep, yeah.
How they unloaded? You didn't clean it all out.
It just kept sliding down and they pulled it out the doors at the bottom. That was one of the things I got to help with when I first on the farm.
I hadn't heard it go that way.
So then,
That stuff sounds like a house store.
yeah, it does, but they didn't have any of those at our place. So.
I think along with the corn that a lot of farms are a lot small. They were long ways. And I know our farm we planted anywhere from 5 to 10 acres every year. It's some we picked and we ground some corn. After it dried for years, we grind it up, feed the cows. So the herds are a lot smaller. I think a lot of them were if they had 15 cows, 20 cows.
They had
30.
6 cows.
We got only, we were milking 18 cows by hand while we had electricity. And I always enjoyed milking cows by hand. I just sit down and relax and put your head against the flank and pull away. I was 4 years old when I milked my first cow, believe it or not. It's 2 sisters and I, and we took a handle and milked the cow out. But I think I've milked cows ever since. I enjoyed that milking by hand the most of any of it. But even after you work all day and hope you finish that time you got through the chores, but everything was done by hand, and that's why we didn't plant much corn, and the other farms planted much corn. But a lot of it was silage, and the rest of it was for one of the grains, or we could buy a bag of concentrate, 100 pounds of concentrate, mix with at least 2 bags of ground corn, cow meal, and that's how we fed the cows. A very reasonable time. The cost was very, very minimal. And so, but I was going to say that back when my father was plowing the horses, I worked for the town a little bit. He got 250 pounds, 2,000 $1.50 a day, or like that, a whole week. That's what he got from plowing, doing town road work with the horses. That's how the income was back then. And that's when milk was, what, 2.5 cents or so a quart.
Yeah, I think it was less than 10 cents, that's for sure.
So those things have changed with electricity and technology after that. They said in 1945 that things really began to change quite a lot, so I don't know.
I gotta go back to this ice business. Of course, that was where you cooled your milk when I was first around. And one year, when you had an ice house, you put the ice in and then you put a layer of sawdust over it, and you put another layer of ice and sawdust over it. The walls were probably 6 or 8 inches thick with sawdust between, it kept the ice. And then, one year they never got cold enough to really make ice for a long enough period of time. And my dad had to go to Willianic and buy ice to bring it home every day to cool the milk. And you had a original milk tank was just a tank, it wasn't insulated or anything. And then at that time he bought an insulated tank, and we had to have a gasoline engine on the compressor to cool the milk the first few years, because we didn't have electricity until 38. That was tricky when you couldn't make ice, you had to go after it. And then, of course, they got more and more fussy about cooling the milk better and getting it cool quicker, and the bacteria count in it and all those things. Got a lot more.
One of our boys did play with the oxen steers they were and we had them pretty well broke in, but we just couldn't keep up. See, they got twice the size of the kids were anyway. They got big, they weighed a ton apiece, they were big. But we never really worked them. We had too much other farm work we had to do, we couldn't take the time at the time, so. But we've had ox here working with us on our show, we put our shows on all. It was very interesting. In fact, we raked hay with a tilt rake that had no wheels on it, and when the rake filled up, we'd pick up by hand when it would tip over and start in another. That was before dump rakes came about. And we do have a couple here that we have shown in the past, but oxen was just some reason or other we never here on that farm really got involved in that. So we had our horses and that, and we had our tractors. So we went from there.
We always canned food. You cut it up small and put it in bottles and put it in a big pot of water and boiled it. And in the sealed jars, they had rubber seals under the glass tops. You had a clip over the top. That's how you preserve food that needed to be preserved that way. Of course, carrots and potatoes and stuff, you put on a dirt cellar bottom, and they'd keep cool air over it.
My mother did a lot of canning with the vegetables, also with the meat, particularly chicken and pork. It was very good to do it that way. And of course, the salt pork and that, would put it in a crock and put lard over it to preserve it. And people then, back then, used to add eggs. They had a water glass solution that you put eggs in a big jar, and it would keep, I don't know how many days it would keep. I know we've had it for a long time. It would keep for a long time in there. But my wife also did a lot of canning. We did a lot of canning here with the vegetables and all. We did a lot for our family. It was nothing to do with how much cost of beans and string beans and other along with potatoes and so forth. But that was something that was done. Maybe she didn't tell you how she did some of that, but there was a lot of work to do in that. But that's before we had too much in the freezer. But any beef in the wintertime, we butchered we butchered hogs, or we butchered a beef, we'd hang the beef up in the attic, on the attic, it was not insulated at all, that's how we kept the meat up there, and we wanted a nice cut of meat, where we'd go up there, we'd break the green off of it, because that's would be great, been hanging there for a month or two. And by that time it was tenderized very nice and beautiful meat, and it was very good. Do that, so.
Oh, years ago, our first greenhouse, because the weather's so bad in the springtime, I never seen a March as bad as this one, and I've been around a long time. That was horrible. And sometimes in April it's all miserable, and sometimes you get 90-degree weather. So in the early 40s, 44 or something, we built a greenhouse. We had older people cut the trees and hemlocks, brought them to a sawmill and made straight 2x4s, not what they are now, 1 5/8 or 1 1/2. Really 2x4s, and you cut them up, all the rafters, and then groove them so that if you got any drips that go in that groove and go out the side, the glass greenhouse. Then we had these hotbeds that we made with big windows, and we doubled the windows and put sticks for handles on that side to pick the windows up, and you use stones, and you put horse manure on the bottom, and then a little bit of soil, and then you put your plants in there to keep them from freezing. You know, if it's going to be real cold, then you cover them with some kind of top or blankets. At one time, a little whirlwind come up, picked up about 8 sashes, threw them over the wall, the horse ran all, jumping all over the field. What the hell, they see windows flew from here to the end of the building, back of this wall. And we don't have that kind of. Once in a while you get a little whirlwind coming down. But that way you got a head start on your vegetables to plant outside, all potted up, and you could get ahead of the market that way and get a better price.
First, we all, of course, were shipping broken 40-quart cans. Even my older brothers telling about shipping in 10-quart cans, taking to South London from Kill to go on the train to go to Providence. That was before my day, I don't remember that at all. We always took the milk down to the state road and went from there. Pat Sullivan had, I think he had 2 trucks that he hauled milk from everybody. And tell us about one time the trucks were broke, the weather was, snow was too deep or something, and he took milk somewhere with horses. He says that's a long ways to Baltic with a team of horses.
So the milk in the 40-quart cans, how are you keeping it cold? Maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I can tell you about that.
Well, how to keep it cold, when the weather got, usually it was in July or so, but we had a gravity water from the top of the hill down to the house, to the milk room, and a tank outside for the cows. There was overflow with the cows get drinking water. But it was really hot. There was an ice house up in down the road, and there was a Brown's ice house actually up in Walmart. We'd take the old car up, and we'd take a hunk of ice, a block of ice, a 300-pound block of ice, and they'd split that in half for us, and we'd put it on the bumper of the car, and come home with it. And half that one block would go in the water where the milk, where the cans were, and the other would split up, put it in the ice box that was in the house, or where else we needed it. Of course, it melted. It lasted, you get about 2 days out of it. But usually you didn't get 2 or 3 days that really were hot. The other time we didn't do that, we took it down to the spring down below, down the road, and in the field there, and we put the milk in there and cool it, because today you got to have milk that's at least 40 or under before you can ship it to the dairy. But we got by with it that way. But I just think some of the things back in school made a little fun time we had in school. Come by a nice hot summer before school got out with noontime with the pond that we went to was what we call Can's Pond. it's a half mile from school, a half mile from our house here, but when the boys were, get out of school at 12 o'clock, be down there, go skinny dipping. Did this for a while, till the neighbors didn't think we should be doing that, because we get back to school in time, and so forth. But the other thing was, at school, on a cloudy day, we had no electricity, and it gets dark in there. Teacher, we can't read, it's too dark to read. And after talk, we had 2 or 3 talk to her a little bit, and, well, you might as well excuse school and go home. So we go home, no one get home, and the sun will come out, be a bright day the rest of the day, but things like that happen in school, actually happen that way.
When we were delivering milk, we always sold a bulk, but my wife's grandfather peddled milk in Willimantic for years, from 1900 to 1950. And when he originally was peddling milk, he poured it out of the can into the lady's picture.
Oh, I want to say one thing. First, we had ice all the time, and down the neighbor had what you call an ice house, because he lived right near Amos Lake. And it was a double-walled building, not too wide or big, and another space in between.
Sawdust.
Yeah.
Between the walls.
Yeah, they insulated with hay, and then they had ice in there.
We always had sawdust.
Well, maybe it was sawdust, but they used to have these big ice saws to cut the ice and then haul it up with the horses. Yeah. And at that time, when everybody had horses, the first snowplow was a team of horses coming up the hill by Charlie Pendleton riding down the oak plank V plow in the front, and they were on edge, oaks, and then like floor joist the other way, and he'd ride that. And the horses had threaded back shoes that they could put these little things and screw them up.
They were caught
Yeah, for catching grip.
on the ice, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had that, we had, when you had so much snow, the truck wasn't big enough to plow the roads out, and we had some lumber there, and we made a V-plow, my father did, made a V-plow. So that, and the house was belly deep in the snow, and the snow was, go up and down this road to 87, a couple of times anyway, then the truck could get through, and they'd break through and finally make it before we, you just couldn't pass after. But back then, you know, the selectmen would get 15, 20 young people out here, or anyone with shovels and shovels over the road up that way. Did you do that all up there?
Yeah, well, we had a couple of storms where they shoveled the top off the 10-foot drifts before they could go through the plow.
Things like that happened back then, and now the tractors are big and bulldozers and whatnot. We plowed this road up several times with a bulldozer. It was all filled in, but today they got trucks powerful enough to plow through anything.
On Kill Road, the bank was a little up about 5 feet, and then there was a wall, and the north wind would blow into that road and fill it up, so we had 6 foot of snow on the road. And one year, after I was farming myself, they never plowed the road from 26th of December till 15th of March. It never melted. It was so deep, it was 5 foot of snow on the road all winter. And I went down the high bank and then up the hill. Most of the time, the hill, only once in my life I ever saw it drift on the hill itself. Most of the time it didn't drift on the hill at all. One storm it did, but other than that, and just enough trees and walls for the back, so it never drifted in the wall, in the road particularly. So most of the time I can get up the hill somehow. Going to school, you have to understand that the school had all 9 grades in it. Others, I went before I was even old enough to be a kindergartner because I went to school in the afternoon. My sister and my dad went to work. But we had a new teacher fresh out of normal schools. He probably was only 18. And I really wasn't a good student. I was a young student.
School days back when we walked to school, which was a mile away, which was no problem. I went to Academy, 7 miles away. And we had the people that down the road there, lived on 87, they owned the school area where we went to one-room school, but the wives usually, on a bad day, they pick up the kids that had the walking distance and pick them up and bring them to school, or they take them down to Yannick 4 miles away to get the Connecticut bus. But anyway, they were very tight with money like we all were back then. And the fellow was in charge of that, more or less. He told the women to, don't stop the car. When you pick up somebody, you just slow down very slow. You'll save the clutch and all. And so he'd jump on the running board and get in the car. And they did the same thing when you get out of the car, open the door and jump out. The car was just probably crawl overhead, stopped it. Just think of today if we did something like that. Those things happen. So I can't think of. Well, one other thing we did. I guess I told you we were in skinny dipping, right? We did that. Anyway.
I think I was 10 before I found out it was supposed to last smooth or something.
Well, I think nobody. This is a dead end road above our house, but I just went up the road a little bit. And the other way, Can Road, it would open in good weather, you could get through the mud and everything, otherwise that would close up. But winter time, we could slide all the way from here up the hill, all the way down to neighbors die in trouble. And it made an awful nice way to do it, but those are earlier days that we could go down to, so that we went swimming down the pond there or go skating. It was a nice place. My mother hanging land out on the clothesline. One time we come home, things like that happened. It was a very peaceful life back then. We worked hard, but we always enjoyed it. I think I like to work back then. I was unfortunate, but I never cared, but I shouldn't say that I never really cared to go to school. And I got to high school and I told them, well, I'm going to quit school. I got to quit school. Can't I got to be home working. I still feel that way today.
I thought the same thing, but they didn't go to the rest.
And so one day, my mother was very peaceful, my father was very quiet, never got riled up or anything. After picking on her for quite a while, some different days, she'd had enough of it. I thought, why don't you just quit? I never asked her again. Well, stop going to school, I just went to school, graduated. And that's the way it was. She knew how to do it.
Well, sugar was the biggest thing that was rationed, but we were kind of fortunate. My sister, we had, I think, 7 kids, and so her ration for sugar was quite more than she needed, so we had a little bit of extra for our household. The war was, well, actually I went to New Haven for a physical, to go in the service when I was still in high school. But most of the fellows that went down that day with me were working on farms, and they had already started giving us deferments so that we didn't have to go in. So that, but my brother Norman, he was registered in Lebanon, but he was working in New York State on a farm out there, and he went in the first month of the draft a year before the war started. And my other brother went in just over me. He went in after the war was going, but he never actually saw service. He actually went to China just after the war. He would come home, I remember one day, I had young fellows working for me, and he come home and one of them says, well, what do you feel about the price of food in China? He said, well, it's pretty expensive. I was just there last week.
The question from the audience?
Were farmers exempt from going into the service?
After the first couple of years, yes.
After 2 years?
Yeah, they decided they really needed to leave some of us home to work the farms. The other thing I was wondering, when I was talking about cows, more people had 4 or 5 cows than had 12 cows at the time when I was first can remember. There was, when my dad bought the farm, I think there was room for 8 cows upstairs in the barn. He put in a split stable down below, and I think he could have room for at least a dozen plus a couple cat pens. But most people didn't have that much. If they had 6 cows, they had a lot. And most of the cows gave 25 pounds of milk a day instead of 95 pounds a day.
I'll tell you a little story about World War II. We had a guy working for us from my father, and he speaks beautiful English. He was born in Italy and raised in the United States. His brother was born in the United States and raised in Italy, and he taught broken English. And the FBI came during World War II, and they took all our guns because he was an American citizen. And one gun wasn't even fireable. But he joined the Army and the MPs, and then he became an American citizen. But anyway, we got all the guns back after but one. And they never got it back. And 2 years ago, the FBI came again, looking for ammonium nitrate, because they wanted to try to make a bomb. So they couldn't buy it at any store. We had some, and they bought it from us. I wanted to give it to them, but they said, no, we got to pay for it, you know? So they had to make a bomb to see how that worked with the ammonium nitrate. Well, when I was young, I never liked the cold weather. Now I can handle cold weather because I got better insulated boots and all that, and different vests and insulated vests and coats, and if you dress right, the winter doesn't bother you. But one thing I want to tell you something about young kids and the vegetable farming or any farming. Milking, you've got to be there 2 or 3 times a day, milking every day, whether it's a holiday or not. And the same thing in the summertime with vegetables. You got to get this stuff to the market, and you're not going to make any money. And kids from 18 to maybe 25, 28 years old, you're not too interested in farming, but you got to work with the family that grew you up, so you stay there. But it wasn't really important to you. But later on, as you get older, you say, well, Jesus, that was a pretty goddamn good thing to be growing produce food. And we were known for one of the best tasting tomatoes around. And the guy at the store told us, you see those beans? We picked them that morning. He says, these are probably the best beans in the world. You can't get no better.
I don't know, we got through with it pretty well. We always had a good, I think I ever complained about it, I complained it off, we shouldn't complain at all anyway, but we had 3 stoves in the house, and it seemed like me being a boy, I had to get most of the wood in the house and take care of 3 stoves. I might grumble a little bit, but you get some help sometime, but that took some time to get the wood split and get in the house, keep warm, but the house was always warm. Nice to have a wood stove going. I think today I probably I mind the cold more than I used to anyway. So, but it was always nice to have a good hot fire going and so forth. I remember in school, we had a wood stove in school and set up pretty well out in a schoolhouse, which was very big. I think it was 18 or 20 kids in school. And a boy, one of those boys, it took a week to take care of the stove. That's what our job. We got 10 cents a day to take care of the stove. And with a long pipe from the stove to the chimney, sometimes we burned a lot of slab wood that we got from who owned the land there. And so it was a challenge or a game to play, see how hot we get that stove pipe going. Many times it was red hot, so when we didn't burn the place down, it put out heat night. But I don't know, somehow we got through the winters all right. I think the big thing was we had to take the horse up top of the hill every day or every other day. And when we cleaned the barn out with a spreader, it was a long ride up there. It took at least a half an hour just to get up there, so the horses spread out. It was, you might have done, but we all got back. We knew we'd get back where we belonged. So we survived it. I think it's easy to we do today.
I'll tell you a story about the woods in Cutting. We had wood stoves for years and years, and one in the greenhouse too. We was very young, and you'd walk about a half a mile to the woodland, and the lands was always mixed up. Different people owed money, so they give land to pay off their debt or something, and that's how the farmers spread out with different spots with other people's land in between. So you walk and you're freezing your hands going to the woods. Yeah, maybe 8 years old and that. Your crosscut saw, the brothers carry that, and they carry the axe or two. You get in the woods and you start chopping. Within a half hour, you're down to your t-shirt and you're sweating. Colder than summer, you're sweating because you're chopping and that. And when you get thirsty, you go over to the brook and you put your hands on the rocks and you get down and you drink the water. And also you get not thirsty anymore. And that's how we did it for years.
Well, back then you could,
8, 10 quart a year.
in the summer or any of the spring that we had a lot of springs on the whole swamp, had springs out somewhere. And never really thought about got a drink to go to the spring and bend down and get all the water you want to drink with all good clear water. Today we think twice before you think of getting water out of a spring. It was clean water, and we survived that way. I think it was good. Yeah, I don't know, it seems the winter we get through it all right. Cold never bothers us. But it was that nice warm meal you get in the house and so forth that we just survived, that's all. And that Tony was saying, everybody worked together and didn't get much on what you just had to work together. No complaining or anything.
Only real fire that I remember about was the next house. And there was question about how it got started, but that's another story. But the teenage boy that was about 13, he came over to our house and said that the house was on fire. And we actually went over and put the fire out with a bucket brigade.
The old house we were in didn't have any tile in the chimneys, and I had my bed right close. The rooms were cold, but when the chimney went up through there, when you went up attic, you could look in the chimney and see flame going up there. And so my room was where my bed was, and the fire was going. My feet were all nice and warm, but we never had any real problem with fire. We had a couple of fires, but not really dangerous. Nobody got hurt on them. Can't say anything about some of the farm equipment we had, or the trucking equipment we had some fires in it. Well, that we were all okay on it, so I can't think of any at the moment, Carolyn.
We had one bad fire, I think it was about 1978, because we put the 79 in the new cement that we made we moved the gas tanks across the street. Somehow in the workshop, a spark must have got onto carpet and went in to eat. A neighbor stopped by and says, "There's a fire in your building." Boy, that was going in the, I had a fire truck that I had bought and I was putting in a pump to fill it up, you know, and pump to the fields where you needed water. And that thing, the front was almost all full of flame. So I got the cars out of there, the convertible Cadillac, my other car, and all the other stuff, brand new welder was burnt up and blew up, and the chainsaws and the tires that were mounted for snow tires, and my speaker and a saddle for the horse, one I had in another building, I saved one. That was a very bad thing that happened. We had to put a new building up and we moved the gas tanks on the other side. The wind was blowing the right way, the gas tank and the wall, and the gas tank was here. And the wall stood because the wind was blowing that way, or maybe it would have took blew that and the house too. We were pretty lucky.
We always had indoor plumbing as long as I can remember, because my dad had moved back to the farm from Indiana, and he had put indoor plumbing. The only time that wasn't usable was if the well went dry. When my dad moved in, he said, "Well, that's a wonderful well, it'll never go dry. But you put a bathroom in the house and you put water bowls in the pond, and for some reason the well didn't stand up quite so good."
So speaking of indoor plumbing, well, when we got electricity, we got indoor plumbing, but before that was outdoor plumbing. Had the two-seater. You didn't sit there and read the paper for 2 hours. Yeah, that was a great thing, and he put it indoor plumbing.
Well, we didn't have any indoor plumbing for several years there, but our outhouse is, it's a picture of it, picture that way, I kind of figured out one of the maps we have here. It was a long ways from the house, and you had to make sure you did all you could before you got to bed, and I hope you didn't have to wait till you got up in the morning, but that was always a cold trip down there. Well, I can think of some of the things the guys played on. They had probably come or something, and they had to use it, and boys would hear about it, so they'd go down behind the outhouse, and the girl, the lady would be down there, and, "Hey lady, move over, we're working down here." That happened quite a few different times. I hear stories about people, and they get in and lock the door, and then they tip it over or move it around a little bit while they're in there. That happened quite a few times, different people. But it was a good thing when we had plumbing in the house. It made a big difference.
Well, we didn't have refrigerator until way after high school. That's at, 51, 52 in there. And the indoor plumbing was a lot better than running in an outhouse, in the wintertime especially. The outhouse was quite a ways away from the house when it snowed, and it used to snow a lot. You'd have to shovel the path, shovel the path, shovel the path.
So there's always that one friend in your childhood that was the mischief maker, or maybe it was an adult buddy who always did the one thing. My father was one of those, and he moved the mayor's outhouse to the middle of their town green as a teenage boy. On Halloween night, they all got together to do that.
This particular person's outhouse had a habit of getting tipped over every Halloween, so we just run into the problem, so we decided to sit in it that night. Of course, they tipped it over within a minute with the door down.
We used to have a shortage of water when we had chickens and cows and and that we had, the truck and would drive down to the brook, fill them up on the barrels and put burlap bags over them so they didn't splash out too much. And then you have an empty barrel, you bucket it over and then put the last pot down, 2 people on the ground. Well, a couple of different Halloweens, we did it the night before, right during Halloween night, and when we get up in the morning, there's somebody dumped all the barrels over. That it would fill them up again. And I did most of the spraying from high school to now, and I had the Iron Age Fokker I brought, that was the name of the sprayer from Malurva, and it was a 500-gallon sprayer, and I spray corn in that with my shirt off, DDT, one hand and drive with the other, and then I'd dive in the pond after I was done and clean off. Now, I'm still here.
Do you know what this is?
Looks like something you put a hot thing on it so it don't burn the table.
That's a traveler,
Oh,
and it's marked. And they give you a measure,
for measuring?
and there's an arrow on this here. Right here, the arrow right here, you start right here, and run that over to the distance to go, and that, how many inches it would be.
Huh. I'm pretty good.
That was for wagon wheels quite often.
The wagon wheel, it's all the same thing, wagon.
What is that?
Well,
Candle
that's a
holder?
Candle holder. That's a hog scraper and a candle holder. Which is the hogs is scrape the hair off. And,
Huh.
but you use it for candle holder. And, what else we got down there anyway?
What is that?
Card machine,
Looks like when a kid was bad, he could get better.
It was a razor strap.
you can scratch the back of that if you wanted to.
So they work this way,
Yeah.
and that was for the wool, for spinning. And they would comb the fibers straight. These are really large ones.
Anybody know what
You don't know
is?
that one?
It's the weight sometimes.
No, wait, we got it.
Ernie, you want to use the mic?
Oh, okay. That's a tether. You tether your horse or your cow out with that. With a long rope or chain that's long enough to, so at least put her head up and down. So some horses would walk away with that, but it's fairly heavy. I don't know what's that weight, Tony?
15.
15 pounds, I don't know actually that one. And the other one down there, that plane, that molding plane, if you really have to look it over and see what it is, that big window sash, big window sash, the same as it almost today, that's what that was.
Like a router.
Yeah, it was longer, done by hand. So what's the last one there, Carol?
The last one's a hetchel, and it was for combing the flax plants that were made into linen.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
they had to break the stalk open, sort of like a goldenrod type stalk, and then get the fibers out from the inside and comb them straight.
That's before my day.
That was a lot of work, we were talking about work, and a lot of time I was put in to get flax and to make it into, soap linen or whatever they were doing with it.
That changed over time.
So just to repeat the question for everybody, as mechanization came into agriculture, did you see it creating and causing waste? And what changes because it's prevalent in society now?
I don't think so. I never.
As far as waste goes, what did I do?
I'll do one first before Ernie. A lot of times we have an excess of yellow squash, green squash, and small tomatoes. And the past several years, Soup Kitchen has been getting a lot of that stuff, a whole pickup load, 10 days apart or something like that, 7, 8, 9 times in the summer. And then the butternut squash, acorn squash that have a little nick are not perfect quality to go to the store. We said that, call the Soup Kitchen up, and most of the time they'll send a truck out, pick them up, or a friend. And these tomato boxes weigh 20 pounds, sometimes you give them 18, 20 at a time. And that's how you get rid of some of your excess stuff.
I think as far as waste goes, I think we're wasting an awful lot today. Whether it's in the building materials or what, because they have new techniques and so forth. I can think my grandfather's one now, when they worked on, they'd take scrap wood and they make a lot of stuff out of it. And today, because of the cost of things, we just throw away and stop something brand new, whether it's in a building or what. I think there's a lot of waste there that we don't need, but be more careful on it. And a lot of it is money wise, dollar wise, it's gonna cost you maybe retain that and build something out of it, or you go buy brand new stuff. I think this is a sad thing on what I see it anyway.
Over the years, we worked with international, where the people come from everywhere. And we had Chinese in our home for 3 to 6 months period, and then they would change it and have a different one. We had a couple fellows from Africa, and that was they was talking about going to school, and the boy said he had, 7 or 8 miles he walked to school in Africa. And the others was, one of the girls was from Holland, and she just had no idea what a hill was. She got in trouble going both up and down hills, going too fast with the tractor, or running out of power and trying to stay too high. The idea that the gravity changed when you started going up now. It was interesting, different things that they just never seen. But the African fellows, they really were dumbfounded at the things they did. Of course, I let them drive tractor after they got a little bit used to it. One of them, I forget, I think we was bringing hay down from up the road down to feed the cows and the free stalls on. And he drove around the corner so sharp that he hit the side of the door right side of him. He missed it with the front of the truck, but the front got by and he turned right around and he didn't realize where the truck was going to go the rest of it.
Oh, the neighbor had 4 or 5 Jamaican workers, and once in a while, he didn't have a lot, we had things to do, and we had them help us. And they're very steady workers, but in our work days, I don't think there's any faster 3 workers in the state than we was, because we could run, and we run between empty and full bucket, trot and run. We had to get in shape for baseball. We'd have a field a mile away through the woods and a back road. So I'd drive up, leave the manure spreader, run back, get the payloader, and then run back for lunch, run back and again. And then the other field was another 2 miles the other way, and I'd do the same thing, and I'd be running and running. And that's how you got things done.
I think a lot of things that were done, Harry was proud of what they did, whether it was a stacking wood or a straight windrows or not windrows, but planting or anything else, everything was done very neat and very proud of what they did. But one thing we did with hay, and I don't know how many of it did it, but after we raked the hay and we put little bunches of hay all through the field, they made them, they were big enough for a pitchfork to pick up, and when we load it on the wagon, we just didn't throw it on the wagon. We'd start in the front corner of the wagon, it's just this was the wagon here, we'd start in and put the first tack, the first pile bundle here, and we'd go down the whole side and put a bundle on each one for the end, and all around the other side. Then we'd take enough hay, had somebody on a wagon that would be on there, spread it out, and we'd put some in the middle of the wagon, and slide it out and pack it down, and went all the way up that way. Very much the same way all the time to get a good level below the wagon and straight, and then we would comb it down, so it looked nice, and that's how we would do it with it. I don't know what, and they did that same with stacking hay outside. When they put stacked hay outside, it was very neat and done, and they got through it. It would shed water quite well, there was no ragged edges on it, and no dents or anything, and it would be all a nice round stack of hay. I think they did that with a lot of things that way. Even when they took corn and then stacked put shocks out there in the field, they would put on just a certain way, and so they'd hold against the weather and everything, until they got to use it. I think everything was done that way back then. They were proud of how you plowed your fields, how you got your fence rows clean, always have them clean, and somehow when we get bigger and rush and all, we don't seem to be quite so important to make them as nice and be proud of it. But I think the wood pile, I think Tony did that, all this stuff was, you're proud of what you did, that's all.
You all said something about youth programs. How many of you gentlemen have been with the 4-H or FFA or part of it? And what was it like as the 4-H or FFA when you gentlemen were younger men?
First I remember about 4-H is that my sister was in 4-H, and my older brothers are all in 4-H. A couple of them made trips to Chicago and things like that with it when they would have us. But it's interesting to see how it's changed and how people, their attitude toward animals. And the other thing that I was going to say about, when I was a kid, you hardly ever saw a deer because they were getting eaten, I presume. Now there's very few days in the winter that I can look out my kitchen window on the back side of the house, and they go by there every day, see their footprints in the snow all the time. You see there's a lot more around. Well, I think we had one neighbor that was rather poor, and they lived on an awful lot of deer, I think.
Talk about 4-H. We live 4-H. We do. My wife and I, we've been 4-H members from when we were all up to get to be a member. Our kids all go up to 4-H. It's been a great part of our lives to make the best better. And so my mother was in 4-H, and we had she was a leader for a while. We were leaders here for 30 years. We had a club, and our grandson has taken over that part of it now. But 4-H has been a great part of our lives. And I wish would you want to say anything about 4-H?
Well, if it weren't for 4-H, we never would have met.
Go back.
And the April, they have the 4-H auction.
Yes, promote.
4-H, I was a hospital leader for 4-H group one time, and then I was in the tractor 4-H with Merv Leffenwell and the Leffenwells program there, and we donate a lot of plants and pick up from other greenhouses and growers, and usually bring it up to the 4-H camp the night before the auction. And I guess the auction's going to be this the end of April, 28th and 29th or something, I can remember some date like that.
Friday and Saturday.
Yeah, so we got a bunch of different plants that we can set up there. We always have extra marigolds and pansies and cabbage and broccoli. And they get, 30 flats of mixed vegetables.
We started camp, I did anyway, in 1941. We went to Preston, did Dolly Pond down there. The camp was held there for 2 years, till we moved up here in Franklin, and we had camp here the first year in 48. It was, back then when it was Preston, it was, I believe the refrigerator was $9 a week. I think today it's 400.
It's over 5.
It's over $500 per week, but all the campers, the counselors, the only paid staff was the cook, the nurse, and the waterfront could have been paid, I think, but everybody at camp today is paid counsel, some counsel paid, so they have a different system of how to do it, but we were all volunteer camp counselors, most of us were when we got old enough, and we tried to teach different types of things at camp for a week or 2 weeks, and now camp is a lot different than it was. Like the kids, we can tell how good a time they have from our place here where we live, here the camp, kids down there, we can tell just what kind of week they have with the noises they make. It's pretty good. So,
I did a lot of school dance calling in for the 4-H at different times. They're fair time and most every year, but now they don't do it anymore. And they called me a couple of times, says, what can we do? I says, I already do have the old school dance and I can teach them. I went up alone several times and the kids had a lot of fun. And the FFA, the same thing. They voted me like an honorary member, and I never went to the FFA school, but I have plaques in saying I'm an FFA member.
We'll have a last comment from Oliver here.
Just talking about the 4-H camp. I was president of New London County Farm Bureau when we bought the land from Tilly Cox. He wanted, and I know one of the hardest things we did was we had a discussion. I guess there were about 10 of us, and we were supposed to decide how much we were going to offer to pay Tilly Cox for his land from the Farm Bureau to build the 4-H camp. And I forget, I think we paid $10,000, but I won't guarantee that.
the original property was 17 acres you bought.
But,
17 acres you bought original.
yeah.
We had another 5 acres for after that.
Yeah, well, I had it out, but I mean, so I was involved at that time.
And 4-H is a great program, FFA as well, and that served all my children very well, and I spent some time in the ranks as a youth as well, and I think it's a great foundation. I'm still a leader and have a urban club now, and I did 33 years with a livestock club, so it's a great way to get children out in the community and learning new things.
Yeah, back when we had county agents coming around, I can remember we were building the chicken coop, and the county agent came and convinced my dad to send my older brothers to 4-H camp. I can't remember the guy's name now, it'll probably come to me when I'm on the way home. But that was some of the things we did. Well, the other thing that my dad did, every Saturday, they took, that's how we sold the eggs from the 300 chickens we had, was they peddled them to people in Atlantic. So they peddled the eggs and then they bought the groceries and come home on the same day. You didn't make extra trips. Well, of course, during the war, you actually never did extra trips. That was 3 gallons of gas a week, unless you had other needs. You didn't have to, something special you had to do that with all the gas you got for the week.
Russ Stevens was a county agent for New London County for quite a few years. and he'd keep us posted on blights coming up, different diseases, or certain bugs or earworms for corn, and they blow up from south and come this way, and you could have a couple of days to be prepared and have the right sprays to knock these things out. And that was very important to us. He did a lot. He had a lot of problems. He had a pig stomach or valve put in, and he used to have to take a pinch of rat poison to keep himself alive. Imagine that. Rat poison, and you have to take a little of that somehow. I got one interesting thing to say. My brother Paul, after we bought the Cub tractor in 1947, it had the pull-up handle with a button. So then we changed to hydraulic the next year, and we bought the Planter Junior, and that Planter Junior is still planting corn and peas and beans. And it's older than some of us out here. But we marked rows, and then we'd spread fertilizer in the row, and then the other kid would jog up and down with a hoe to mix it a little so it didn't burn the roots when you plant it. So after 2 weeks of that, my brother says, "Hey, no more watts." I says, "Well, I'm going to do that." So I did it, no more watts. So when I got a watt once in a while, I'd open the bag of fertilizer and rub your hand in there 2 or 3 times, and the water would disappear after a week.
Go back to the sugar days, it's a great ration. We had plenty of sugar for ourselves, but there was a time when, I can remember in school, we noticed a wagon go by, the load of sugar bags on full, and a couple went by. And it wasn't long after that, we saw 2 black cars go by that were passing, up there, and we figured out what it was, finally heard about it, but they had a bootlegging down there, 3 miles from us, down the dirt road. They had quite a system going in. They did catch on to that bootlegging I've heard about, but they actually happened. That was in 42, 43 that happened.
I just want to mention, if anybody ever split wood with black powder.
I don't remember that.
My father saw it somewhere in the catalog. It looked like this. The hole was bored out, and there was a little hole here for the fuse. And this end was tapered, and it was done on a lathe, so it was kind of sharp. So when you put a couple tablespoons of black powder in there, a piece of newspaper to hold the powder in, then you drove it into the log. Well, as it goes into the log, that piece of wood is compressed into powder. And you put a rock or something against this end, light the fuse, and step back. And that thing was a 4-foot piece and blow it up in 3 pieces. He went up to Hartford to duplicate, got a 25-pound keg of black powder, and we as kids, we and brother, I used to make some pretty good bombs with that stuff too. That stuff worked good.
You wouldn't want to try it today, would you?
No.
So I think part of looking back at our history and listening to stories from those with so much experience, we can't look at where we're going with a clear view until we know where we've been. And I'm a real lover of all things historic and history, and love the stories from history the best. And one way that I honored our family history was walking oxen with my son and his uncle to celebrate our town's 300th. We walked them from Killingly, where the farm had originally been, over to Mansfield, the 2 boys and the 2 teams of oxen. It's not something I would ever do again, but it was worth doing once. But yeah, that's a rare event to take those for a long journey like that. It was 5 days. But I think that gives those boys an appreciation of what their ancestors did and an understanding of how early agriculture worked with oxen and with horses. Because if the kids don't come to places like Blue Slope and experience how it was, they're not going to appreciate what they have now.
I think that, I like that way of life much better than what I'm seeing going on now. Everybody worked hard, we all worked together and stuff, we hay by hand, pitching hay by hand, raking hay by hand. But, everybody worked, and, I think it was a better way of life myself, I enjoyed it.
I think I personally like to go back. I still think some days that I wouldn't mind going back to milk cows by hand if I could, and the size we were, we didn't have a lot of cows. We had 18 to 20 milking cows, and we would milk by hand, but that was, I never objected to that. Because you always had neighbors that come and help you do things, and it was all together. It was great.